someone reopened a grave that had been sealed for 100 years. Inside was a warrior's boat burial, and another body was placed inside the same grave. Archaeologists uncovered the site near the small community of Vinjura in central Norway. The discovery came during excavations connected to construction along the E39 highway, where researchers began investigating what appeared to be an ancient burial mound at a place called Skeiet. At first, the mound seemed like many others found across Scandinavia. Boat burials were a well-known practice in the Viking world, often reserved for people of high status. When archaeologists began to excavate the grave, they found the remains of a long wooden boat nearly 10 meters in length. Inside lay the first burial. The skeleton belonged to a man, placed in the vessel along with weapons that marked him as a warrior. A sword, a spear, and a shield had been arranged beside him, suggesting that the burial likely dated to the late 8th century, during the final centuries before the Viking Age reached its height. Graves like this were not meant to be disturbed. Once the burial was completed, the mound above it would have sealed the grave, marking it as a place of memory for the community that lived nearby. Yet something unusual had happened here. Roughly a century after the man had been buried, the mound was opened again. Whoever returned to the grave appears to have known where to dig. The mound was carefully excavated until the earlier burial was exposed. But instead of removing the warrior or disturbing his remains, the people performing the second burial did something far stranger. They placed another boat inside the grave. The second vessel was smaller than the first, about 7 or 8 meters long. Inside it lay the skeleton of a woman, buried with objects that suggested she too had held an important place in her community. Archaeologists found large gilded brooches, a necklace of glass beads, scissors, a spindle whorl used for spinning thread, and a decorated harness fitting that had been repurposed as jewelry. The head of a cow had also been placed in the grave as part of the ritual offering. The most remarkable detail, however, was the position of the boats themselves. The smaller boat had been carefully placed within the larger one, so that the two vessels rested together inside the same grave. One burial enclosed within another, separated by nearly 100 years. To accomplish this, the people who reopened the mound would have needed to remember the location of the earlier grave and deliberately return to it long after the first burial had taken place. The warrior's remains were left undisturbed. Instead, the woman was buried beside him, her boat nested inside the older vessel. Why this was done remains uncertain. One possibility is that the woman was related to the earlier warrior, perhaps a descendant who was meant to share the burial place of an important ancestor. In societies where family lineage determined power and status, burial beside a respected predecessor could reinforce claims to land or authority. Another explanation points to the role of ancestors in Norse belief systems. The dead were not always considered distant or forgotten. In some traditions, they remained connected to the living community, their graves sometimes becoming places connected to memory and identity within the landscape. If that was the case, reopening the mound may not have been seen as disturbing the dead at all. Instead, it may have been understood as joining the living and the dead across generations. But the truth behind the burial at Skeiet is still unknown. The two individuals remained together in the same grave, their lives separated by a century, but their final resting place deliberately shared.